Mr. Barker?
I'm turning the light off. I'm gonna sneak over here.
You're concerning me. You're kind of doing what Ray did. You're up next and you were leaving the room.
Well,
Yeah.
We gotta go the same way.
So, well, our next topic that we want to talk about is something that you all had asked us to look at for quite some time, and that is wayfinding signs and branding. So we've got, Mr. Barker's got a presentation here. We've incorporated some comments that we've received, I believe from Mr. Tompkins, and then Mr. Collins has been doing some work on this as well, so they'll kind of tag team on that. So.
Yeah, and hopefully y'all, this can just be real good, like with Ray here, just a good open discussion. So I don't want it to come off so much as a presentation as just kind of a good discussion. So we've been talking about wayfinding signs, and y'all tasked the staff with looking into some of those opportunities. But you can't get very far when you're talking wayfinding before you start talking branding and what that may aesthetically look like. And then had an opportunity to talk with Councilman Tompkins too, who I'm going to give him some photo credit here. We're getting ready to use some photos that he either took or stole off the internet or something and supplied us with. So obviously put some time into doing that too, so appreciate that. But kind of the objective here is to talk about, when you talk about branding and wayfinding, we need to kind of figure out what that's going to aesthetically look like, or what a design would be, so we can kind of move forward down that road. And I really picked up on something that Mr. Tompkins had pointed out in one of his pictures, is how do we stand out? That was kind of a question at the bottom of your slide, how do we stand out? That's really kind of, I think, kind of where this whole thing starts. We're all proud of Euless, but if you think about the Metroplex as a whole, there are so many commuters and people moving through. It's kind of how do you know when you're in Euless? How do you stand out in some particular way beyond just the folks that are living here? And then that goes into that city branding elements discussion, which is a consistency type thing. And we're going to show you some pictures, and I think what you're going to kind of see is on some level we're somewhat consistent, but really there's more logos and elements and things out there than you might think. And so part of what we want to do is try to kind of focus in and say, okay, moving forward, we need to kind of stay focused and stay all on the same page here, and so that we get a consistency through those different items. And honestly, part of that's going to talk about the Swiss Star, as I'd always call it. I don't know what the official name is. That really started out as where it came from was when Texas Star Golf Course was open. However, I think if you start looking around town and look through some of the pictures we're going to show you, that has really grown well beyond Texas Star Golf Course to what really is kind of a city branding element. In my mind, on Mr. Centerford's shirt, the Euless with the Texas and the lines is still kind of the logo, if you will, of the city, but that Texas Star has been more of that kind of alternate branding element, and you see that in a lot of places. We'll show you some pictures of that. So, and then specific to the wayfinding, once we kind of get to the branding element, we would talk about the very first thing you got to do in the wayfinding is you got to figure out what it is that you're trying to direct people to. What are these locations or facilities or destinations you're directing them to? And Mike's going to talk a lot about that, but if you are familiar with the other cities that have done this, and if you just spend some time thinking through that, the real maybe difficult part of that is you can't do everything. You've got to really narrow that down to what are your key pieces. When you are driving down the road and looking at a wayfinding sign, Mike will tell you that what the studies show is you really need 4. Mike's kind of the optimum number, but not really more than 5 things that you're identifying, or lines to read, or however you want to say that. You just can't process that much information at speed driving by. So you get a sign with too much information on it, you lose its usefulness. And then the last thing is kind of determining, well, once we figure out what we generally want the signs to kind of look at and what location we're trying to identify, where do we put these signs? And this part is real interesting to me because most people, a lot of people, are using some sort of maybe their iPhone or GPS or Surrey, or they've at least got online before they went and looked and have a general idea of where they're going. So the prevailing thought now on these directional kind of wayfinding signs is somebody may be coming into your city and they generally know where they're going. You're just trying to maybe give them a comfort level or a, yes, you are continuing to go the right way. You know, a lot of times I use this a lot, going places I don't know where I'm going, and it'll say continue on Highway 10 for 7.5 miles. And so you're driving and you're kind of in your mind thinking, okay, I'm still going along here. But if you had a little sign that said where you were going and you saw that, it's kind of a comfort. Yes, I am absolutely on the right path here. You couple that with the other part of this is you try to bring people in a corridor. So you think about our city, you think about where you enter our city, 183, 157, possibly 360. And if you're coming here and trying to go to, I pick it, the library, when you come into the city, how do you lead somebody from entry point to the library, rather than just a sign somewhere? It's almost that you're trying to lead them. So it may be a series of signs that if you pick up, let's say if you're southbound on 157 coming into the northern part of the city and you're trying to get to the library, well, you need to pick somebody up when they come into the city. You need to put another sign at what we call decision points, like maybe Harwood Road. I mean, you're not wanting to turn there. A decision point may be the various roads that you're going to cross. And the other side is you're not trying to get too many signs out there and clutter. So Mike will give you a good walkthrough of that here in a minute, but I just kind of plant that seed in your mind how that looks. So this is, how do you stand out? I love this is Mr. Tompkins' picture right here. How do you stand out? So that's Highway 10, and I mean that's, yeah, I mean it's one thing to go put a sign out and do whatever, but how are you going to stand out? How is that going to be useful? In Euless, I think we have done a good job. This is, you know, if you enter our city, you're going to see the water tower, or you're going to see one of our monument entry signs that we've done at the various entry points into the city. And so on some level, I think we're well on our way. We've done a pretty good job. I will point out to you, it's a little hard to see in this picture. You can see it in some I have later, but there's that Swiss star again on that Euless monument entry sign, which is consistent. It's on our water tower. It does say Home of Texas Star around it, but again, it is on our water tower. And then there's the kind of old school highway population entry sign, again with the kind of the Euless, Texas logo on that. But like we talked about, we've got these monument entry signs that we've created. That center picture is the last of the remaining kind of the old monument signs. That's actually up there on Bear Creek Parkway by the Riverwalk. And I mean, it's still in good shape. The Parks Department built that. It is a nice sign, but it's the last one of those. And Mr. Tompkins had made a comment on, I think, his size that he presented to me that I really thought was kind of interesting. I never thought about it before. That at some point in time, if we ever change that out to the kind of the new branding that we're doing, one thought might be, could that go down to Heritage Park?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's part of that whole history of Euless, and I mean, I thought that was a neat idea. So yeah, just food for thought there.
Okay, that's enough of my name, okay?
No, you done with that one?
I'm done with my name.
You didn't take this picture, I don't think, so there. Obviously, here at Texas Star, we worked pretty hard on some signage and branding elements, which is really kind of what you see. Once you get into our city and you get to the main city facilities, you get kind of these bigger monument sign type things that are nice. And right there across the top, you'll see, you know, there's our city monument entryway sign. Let me see if this works. I think I can do this right here. But you know, Ray and them have carried that through on the newer generation, if you will, of these monument signs at our facilities. So the Family Life Center, the museum, you know, it's still that rock with the arch, with the Swiss star. So you're starting to get kind of a repeat element. Even out here at Parks at Texas Star and at the golf course, you know, that star right there is not one of the, but it's a star and it's the arch. I think you just generally get that same kind of piece. Again, now you get to the monument signs and some of the older signs, and they're somewhat similar, but they don't have that same branding element. You've got the Euless Texas logo, and then you'll see a lot of this logo right here. It's a little hard to see in that Wilshire, but that was the old Euless Parks and Community Services logo that they still use. It's a good logo. It has that Swiss star in the flag, but it's a little hard to see. Right there in that flag on top of the L, it has that piece in there. Then the other part of this is our street signage, and if you pay much attention at all, we got all kinds of street signs. Some of it makes perfect sense. A city street, a public city street sign, most of the time is a blue backing with white letters that you see here in the picture. When you see one of these red signs with white letters, that is a private street. May or may not be a gated subdivision. We have some private streets. There are, in a lot of our new subdivisions that specifically are done through planned developments, we'll require them to use these architectural fluted poles. And that is a standard street sign there that says Rio Grande Boulevard, but it's inside a black frame casing that they'll provide. And in this case at Glade Parks, they went in and that's the Glade Parks Bridge logo that's stuck off the back of this. At the very end of this conversation, one of the things that we were going to talk about, and I can't use his name anymore because he said not to use it anymore, but some guy talked about that maybe we could look into some sign toppers as part of the identification of our city. And you've probably seen these before. I've not. I've got some pictures of them. But when you talk about sign toppers, that's typically on top of a sign pole. But there's also the opportunity in a lot of places to do kind of this backside little piece there. So just keep that in mind. When you get into our city and start driving around, as far as what do we currently kind of have, put a series of signs up here, kind of along the top. These are typically what I would tell you your standard text dot wayfinding signs, if you will. We don't, as a city, get to control much of that. We can't say, hey, we'd like to slap a logo on there. I mean, that's just what you get from text dot is we're going to put this and we're going to put it where we want to. And I mean, you get a little bit of influence on what the words need to say.
Now, do we have to pay for that?
We don't have to pay for that.
Okay, because private business does, and it's
Right.
really like $15,000 a year.
It is not, you know, you see a lot of those where it says exit and they even get their logos on
Yeah.
there. No, we don't,
That's
now,
very
I
expensive.
guess part of that is we don't pay for it. The other side of that is we don't, I mean, they're just
Control it,
generic, yeah. That's, get what they get. And then the other thing I would tell you, kind of back to that deal, I'm picking on parks here. If you look at this sign and these three, our parks guys do a great job. They actually fabricate those themselves in-house, which is neat. Now, but one of the things we might want to talk to them about here is those four signs are all different. This one's got a star and it's got like 9 bars or beams or whatever you may call it. This one's got 5. This one's got a star and all the beams are vertical, or excuse me, horizontal, portrait, landscape.
Yeah.
And then this one's got 3 bars. So if you look at all of our city monument signs, they've got the star, they've got 4 bars coming in. So part of that may just be a consistency. Honestly, when Terry and those guys are welding these signs up, you know, weld 3 bars, weld 4 bars. It's not any more difficult. It's just maybe a little paying attention to a little detail. At City Hall, I just want to throw around, we've got some different kind of wayfinding signs at City Hall, and they vary depending on kind of what generation they were put in at. They somewhat match, and they're somewhat that faded green color that Loretta knows that I love so much. But, you know, there's no necessarily real consistency to those. But again, I also pointed out on the Swiss Star, I mean, obviously that is not just Texas Star anymore. That is used, that's the fountain, that's the finance building where it's there in the columns. Of course, the City Hall, it's in the columns. You will see that a lot throughout town. That to me really has become to represent Euless, not just Texas Star. And to that point, on our police vehicles, PD has put that onto their logo. If you take a good look at a police officer's badge in Euless, that star on his badge is the Swiss Star. There's our citizens on patrol. When you look at our city vehicles, and this is just an older police vehicle, you still have some of the Texas with the lines through it piece. And even at that, you get, I mean, here's one with no lines. This one's lines, but it's lighter. This one has lines. This one has lines, but says not since 1953 right underneath it. There's even all these different little iterations of that, and it's kind of like, okay, we need to kind of get to a consistency. That is not to say we need to go pull all of the stickers off the vehicles and put a Swiss star on them. I'm not saying that at all. I think, you know, you look at a police vehicle, you're always going to have some of that because there's an expense to graphing these vehicles, and what we really do is when that vehicle gets rolled off and a new vehicle replaces it, well, then the new graphic is put on. So there's going to be kind of a little rollout period there that you would naturally experience. And then just looking around town, up at Glade Parks, they've incorporated that Swiss star on the edge, and it really is just to kind of let you know that you're in Euless, not in Collegeville, which a lot of people think they are. And again, at the Family Life Center, you can see the Swiss star. There's the Simply Fabulous with the star. I mean, you see that pop up a lot of different places. Really quickly, if you just did on our website and started looking at logos, these are a sampling of logos. So there's the police badge you can see that we talked about. Of course, this logo is almost unique to itself. That is the brick wall out there in City Hall, and it is somewhat the only one that's like that. Access Euless and Euless Today, we're gonna come back to that because we start talking about if you kind of buy off this, the Swiss Star is more than takes a star and it really is kind of a branding element for the city. Well, there are times when the star alone is good, but there's times when you need a little bit more. How do I marry that to Euless? Well, we've already kind of done that. If you look at how the Access Euless logo and that Euless Today, obviously every citizen in the city gets a water bill, and in the water bill is Euless Today magazine, and that's the banner for Euless Today. So I think people are used to seeing that. Wayfinding is where we're going to let Mike chime in here a little bit. And I'll flip slides for you, Mike, if you don't mind. But the starting part of wayfinding is, as we talked about, identifying facilities and locations that you might want to direct people to.
Yes, please.
Number one.
I figured this would give it credibility.
Awesome.
Chris did a really good job at laying a foundation for this discussion, so I will try not to repeat too much what he said.
Mike, I cannot take you seriously with that.
Put it down.
Kim needs a pin back.
I know.
Got him on film.
Thank you.
We tried to get our arms around this whole issue of the wayfinding by kind of breaking it down into 3 areas. And that first area that perhaps warrants the discussion is to identify those key locations that you're trying to draw the people from. And in the consideration of identifying what those destination locations would be, it's kind of who is the audience. And as Chris indicated, the premise of both the location of the signage itself and where you're directing them to is based on your belief that they've already gone to a website and they've looked up the general location and then they put it into whatever gadget or they're using their car to get there or whatever, and what you're doing is just reinforcing the decision that they're making. Do you mind going ahead and advancing and putting all 3 of those kind of there?
Sure.
Before we get into the graphics. So the second consideration, and all of these are interconnected, right? I mean, you really can't separate talking one from the other, is what's practical from a budget standpoint, what's practical in terms of not creating a bunch of visual clutter all over the community with your signage. So it kind of in that context, you're not going to put a sign on all 4 corners of every single intersection where you got 2 arterial roads that cross. Cost prohibitive, again, it'll create that clutter. And lastly, if it's not practical, affordable, it creates clutter to put the signs on every corner, the consideration would be, well then what purpose is that placement of the sign going to serve? So kind of our way of thinking was that you want to capture them when they're first coming into the city, right? And then at the decision point where they're going to turn off of that arterial road, and we got an example that we'll show you later on. Those are kind of the two things you're trying to do. Capture them when they first come in, you're in Euless. These are the 4 or 5 major destinations. And then when you get to that decision point of where you're going to turn off of that arterial, that's where you're going to place that sign.
And just for fun, Mike, I didn't tell you this, but I've mixed up the order of your slides because it's always fun to do that.
Cool.
But so really kind of what I have next, just so you know what's coming up, is Mike and them went and took a look at surrounding cities that have done these programs. I know you're going to be familiar with some of them, but Mike, kind of walk them through. We got a couple slides here of different cities.
Hearst and North Richland Hills went in and did this together, of course. They recognized that they shared borders and it just made sense the way that they're laid out. So these are good examples that if you were to compare several dozen cities with wayfinding, it's pretty consistent with the types of destinations that they're identifying. They're pretty consistent with where they're putting their arrows. There's a lot of science behind how these signs are put together, and it deals with the typical, you read from left to right, and the first thing that the information you want to pop up is the direction that you need to turn needs to come before the destination is. Anyway, there's a bunch of science to it, but anyway, there's variations of the same thing. So it's also it's the information on the sign, right? But then it's also the design, and perhaps the design reflects the character or some image that the community is trying to project. And perhaps when we get to others examples of like South Lake and Coppell, that might reflect their character, might reflect what image they're trying to portray of their community. South Lake, I think Chris and I both agree, we just really like all of the design elements associated with that. And in some way, the arch at the top with the S for, I guess it's SNL for the South Lake, could be a little bit similar if you can picture the arch with the swoosh star in the middle as that.
So you don't even have to picture, we made one for you, but I want to show you, and this is absolutely just an example. Nobody's saying this is what we need to do. This is just an idea to start some conversation, but you could do something like that, for instance.
I like it.
Oh, magic.
Magic.
That's great.
Yeah.
How did you get the star to float in the middle of the circle?
Well, that's the real magic.
It costs a little more.
Do a deductive alternate on that bid. That's gonna be the hard part.
The wind can't blow very far. That's the bottom line.
But obviously the idea here is if you're playing upon the design that we generally have with the monument entry signs. You got the arch, you got the four pieces, you got the star, and then you got your name pieces. I actually like, if you go, let me see if I can do this. I like in South Lake, they're using their S, which I guess means South Lake, but if you weren't from there, maybe you didn't know what that is, what that was. I like down at the bottom, you see that one in the inset there, where it actually said City of South Lake. So we kind of incorporated that as well here, where it does say City of Euless spelled
I really
out.
like that.
So-
Yeah, I do too. I really like that.
So if you look at South Lake, they've got a very comprehensive sign program that's associated with their wayfinding. And if you were to drive around there and pay close attention, if money was no object and you had an endless budget, theirs is a really good example because they've matched their entryway signage with the wayfinding program that in general is bringing you to the various destinations. And then when they take you onto the site that is that destination, then they've got additional signage that, for example, if you were to be brought to this general area after you were brought to the Texas Star Sports Complex, then their signage could be much more detailed, and then you would begin to identify the individual destination points within this general area. Or if you were in the City Hall Municipal Complex, for example, then you would begin to direct them separately to finance, HR, engineering, or whatever the buildings were. But they've got just a
I don't know if
wonderfully
y'all know this.
awesome.
You know, at City Hall, we have the pole sign that has all the arrowways and stuff. You know what we get to do almost daily? Turn that and pull back around where the kids move it because they think it's real fun to move everything so the arrows point all different ways. So selfishly, I like a fixed sign that cannot be moved by some kids.
So Chris will go out there and ask the kids, could you please give me directions too? Absolutely. What's the next slide you have?
The next slide I have for you, this may be, and this is just again, this may be kind of my, talk them through, we talk about kind of 4 is the optimal number. This is just thrown out for discussion. This may be the kind of 4 that your staff would lift up and say, these are kind of the 4 areas that you might be trying to direct somebody, but again, this is just a discussion. Yes, no, for some
Yes.
reason you don't want this one, a different one, etc.
I like it.
That would be a southbound, but northbound we could also include the Bear Creek Dog Park, Amphitheater, Pavilion, that kind of stuff if you're heading northbound.
And that's a good point, Jeremy. You say you want to keep it to 4. It doesn't have to be the same 4 all over the city, but it's kind of where you are. And what happens is, and Mike's going to give you an example here where we take you through kind of this pathway. You'll notice as you're going through a pathway, you start dropping off. I mean, eventually you get to the place where you turn to go to the Family Life Center, right? Well, that one drops off.
Right.
Then there's an opportunity, maybe there's something else that you would pick up at that point in time. So
But if you go back, if you go
The
back
sign
to the
says
South
go
Lake,
back.
if you go back to the South Lake one, I mean, we have a lot of words
Be a
horizontally.
U-turn.
I mean, I think 4 is fine, but we have a lot of words, like, I'm sitting here thinking Texas Star Sports Complex, can we eliminate one of those words and still municipal courts library? I mean, there's a lot to look at when people are driving
Right.
quickly. There's a lot to look at horizontally.
Well, you get into some of that, for instance, look at that very first one. I mean, municipal complex, that means a lot of things. To me, it
Right.
also means the library. But
Right.
if you don't know that, do you need library on there, you
See,
know?
I don't think most people who don't work for a city would think municipal complex would mean library.
Right.
No.
And maybe, I mean, city hall is,
But
maybe it's city hall slash library.
Yeah, I think city hall, because if you assume you're going to city hall, all the other
Right.
city functions are gonna be there.
And you, yeah, I mean, the police, we could probably shorten down to police/courts, or, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't need the word
Just
department.
put jail.
Jail.
Well,
Get a
and,
lot of questions for this jail.
you know, you can maybe take the word sports, you can be Texas Star Complex. The idea with that is we're not sending you to Texas Star Golf Course. It's-
Exactly, you do have to separate that.
Right, right.
You know, as we have this discussion, I love the idea of these signs, but I keep thinking, my mind keeps going back to, is our timing really off? With all the construction and all the detours we're gonna have throughout the city, we're gonna have to be very careful in putting up any signs before it's all completed. Because
Yeah.
we may be directing
You'll be-
people the complete wrong
We'll
way,
be directing
and that would
over
be
a bridge
worse
that
than
isn't
not
there for
having
a
any
year and a half.
signs.
Good point.
No, I agree, but this is a good time to start budgeting for it.
Absolutely, and
getting it
start
in.
thinking about it. but-
Because when we do have something new, it's nice to roll out a fresh look day
Yeah,
one,
if
when
Uh-huh.
we're
we
ready
could-
to open
if
it.
we get to a point where
No,
we're
I
all on
agree
the
with
same
that.
page, then your staff can go to work getting some details, and eventually
Yeah.
that would end up in a budget request, and
Yeah.
it will take some time, but.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did have that discussion about the fact that you, just as soon as you would to put one of these up, and then they detour you around, that.
You just gotta put a little sign over it saying, you can't get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a year.
Yeah, that's right. So the 4 destinations that we kind of identified at the staff level included the Municipal Complex Library, Police and Courts Building, Family Life Center, and then the Texas Star Sports Complex.
Now, I heard, Jeremy, you mentioned to potentially consider the park system there
I'd
with. the
love to
dog
put
park.
one on Glade to say, here's the dog park, here's the Bear Creek Amphitheater, whatever, just so we can rub that into Grapevines. Because I'm not gonna drag someone from Grapevine all the way down to Texas Star, that would be really rough.
So, are there other key destinations that we're missing that we need to,
Well, we're having the Texas Star Sports Complex, but are we really listing the golf course, or are we just considering that all as part of one whole
So
thing?
when Mike walks you through this kind of idea of how it leads you to a corridor, eventually, if you're going to Texas Star Sports Complex, we get you down to Highway 10. So the thought would be, I mean, you get to a point where we have Texas Star signage out on it. That's
Yeah.
Texas Star Golf Course signage. We have parts of Texas Star signage. I think these are to get you to the general Texas Star Sports
The area.
Complex. They have individual, monument signage from Dr. Pepper Star Center to parts of Texas Star, Star Golf Course.
And I don't know how you would do it, but as you get closer, and I don't know how many signs we're looking at doing, if we're to the point now where we're just directing them to here, it'd be nice if we would have something on there, because I don't think we put Raven's Grill anywhere. And I think there are so many people we talk to, they don't even know that there's a grill here.
You're right.
And I don't know, and same thing with the convention center part of it that we do here. I don't know how you would sign that, but as you get closer to it, just to be able to have that out there.
Mike, walk them through, because I think this is going to answer that question. Walk them through the sample sequence, because again, you start dropping things off as you get
Right,
closer, well then
sure.
that's where you add in
You
maybe
add
something
that-
specific to.
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
more detailed.
So the pathway approach as opposed to there being signage everywhere. So using this as an example, if you are eastbound on Cheeksburger approaching 157, there would be a sign that would indicate the major destinations, and we're going to direct you to go southbound on 157. Or if you've come off of the 121 and you're meandering through to get to 157, you're southbound approaching mid-cities, there'll be a sign there, and obviously all of the arrows are going to be
There's the
directing
example
you
right there,
south.
where you just said.
Absolutely. So this is that you've arrived in Euless, you are going to be looking for the following one of these destinations in there. So We would then continue.
This is kind of funny though, Mike. See, y'all see that right there?
Yeah.
That's the Texas Star Sports sign. I mean, so I guess even in the old iteration, they kind of have that idea. It's just a single. You think, man, that's a long way from Texas Star, but somebody coming into the city. So
Yeah, so they don't turn left on mid-cities and never get there and end up at Bear Creek.
and so all
Exactly.
things our example here, we're going to use the 4 that we were discussing earlier, but you can kind of see. So again, Mike, you continue down.
So we're again operating under the assumption that you've already looked at the website. You know generally that the Texas Star Sports Complex, or where you know the ultimate major street, the address, whatever. So all we've done right now is reinforce that you've entered ULIS and you're going.
Now, that sign right there is actually in Bedford.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
We're gonna make that
We're not going to
point.
ask them. We're just
It
going to
is,
put them
and
up.
part of the consideration is getting Bedford to pay for it.
Yeah.
That
Pretty
brings up a
confident.
good point, is that we don't control all of the right-of-way, and there's gonna be cooperation with the cities, but mostly with us, we're gonna have to cooperate with TxDOT. And fortunately, there's other communities that have kind of blazed the trail for us, that we know generally what the requirements of TxDOT are gonna be, and mainly it's gonna be a structural or technical issue with the type of pole.
Well, Mike, that brings
That
up
you're
an
gonna place
interesting
up.
discussion. When we started talking about this 4 years ago, the sign discussions, wayfinding signs, the discussion was that TxDOT wouldn't allow us to put signs on Highway 10, and then the following year, Hearst put them up on Highway 10. But Hearst never even went to get approval, they just put them up. That's what I heard.
They
from
went
Al.
with the forgiveness over permission
Yeah.
model, yeah.
You know,
We
because-
would never do something like that.
Well,
But they're still there.
you
You know,
know,
we've worked with TxDOT in the past, and when you start building those monument entry signs that are rock, and I mean, they get really, you get these 30-foot clear zones and all that kind of good stuff. In general, when you get into a single pole sign like this, even if you're using some sort of architectural looking sign, in fact, most of those, if you look closely at them, are really bolted around a pole. That bottom fluted piece that looks so solid is really just kind of
Yeah.
a plastic piece that bolts around the pole.
Oh, yeah.
You have to meet their shear standards, and the whole idea behind it is if a car goes off the road and hits that pole's gonna fall over, and that's why they get so bent out of shape about those big monument signs. So a lot of the cities have worked with them, and I don't wanna tell you that what you're seeing there, they'll absolutely approve, but in general, you see these in other communities, that's why they're approving them, is because they'll meet that shearing standard. If you ever look, if you go down Harwood Road sometime and stop at one of those medians, and you'll see just like a yield sign or any of those signs out in the median, you'll see a little base coming out of the ground and a little triangular piece, and then another triangular piece to it, and the pole going up. That's a specifically designed shear pole. If you hit that with a car, it
In fact,
comes right off that shear pole.
they've got those just the little triangles all along the medians.
On 10?
On 10.
That's the state going back in and retrofitting. Their old signs on 10 did not have those. They were just in the ground.
Oh, okay.
And they're putting those in, and they'll be moving them over to those triangles.
so we can put an entry sign on the west side of our city on Highway 10 now.
You're talking about like the big monument
Yeah,
signs.
that's a
some
little bit
signs.
different
Yeah.
structure.
I mean, people coming from west to east in Yules on Highway 10, they don't know where Yules starts to stop.
We've always talked, the most likely point with TxDOT there is right by the flame in the
Yeah.
little triangular median
Uh-huh.
area,
That'd be a
because
great
you can
spot.
almost get to that 30-foot clear zone for one of those monument. I mean, obviously, those are pretty substantial. I'm talking about our standard city
Yeah.
entry sign.
Yeah.
And that's the closest we've gotten there. And we just, I know, Loretta, I think we've got actually
There's still
a little bit of funding in that project. We could probably do one more. And then the other place we've always looked at that is northbound on 157 at South Pipeline Road, generally by the horse farm area.
Another good example.
And put one in that. Now, the biggest issue there is if you drive by and look at that corner real closely, it is so encumbered with utility poles, street lights. It's kind of like, where do you put it that you can actually see it, that it's not stuck behind those. And as you know, Mr. Bynum, we've been pretty successful when properties develop. I'm thinking about Quick Trip on Harwood, Starbucks on Main Street, where we've worked with that developer as the property was developed, and they've just created an easement for the city sign to be in, and in many of those cases, they maintain the landscaping around it. So part of the thought, specifically down there to the horse farm property, has been, as that develops someday, it may be a little more clear where a sign needs to be that will look correct. But I know, in my mind, you got that, you got the one on the west side on 10, those are kind of the two entry points in the town that we don't have one of those monument signs at yet.
Okay, so TxDOT is approving it, I mean, we can do that.
Absolutely.
Good,
Absolutely.
good. Great to
So
hear.
continue with the example, we are using that for the Euless Family Life Center when you approached Midway, then you're gonna go eastbound, that was your decision point, right? And then as you continue westbound and you're gonna go to the municipal complex, City Hall, whatever it's gonna end up being called, the library, that's your decision point to turn off the arterial. So that would be the concept that would be replicated off of the arterials in various parts of the community.
Yeah, I think to Councilman Sayers' point, you're seeing these signs drop. Obviously, you went through here, you're gonna get down to Highway 2, you're gonna have one that says, police and courts this way, takes stars. Now you're down to 2. So you can go back into adding, maybe it's Ravens Grill, or maybe it is parts of Texas Star Golf Course as you get closer to the facility because you freed up some of those blanks.
Because if this concept is acceptable, then we can go take it to that next level and begin really to develop a comprehensive program that you could implement over phasing that would either be by logic or budget or however y'all want to do it.
I like that phased approach, I mean, and we're being consistent.
So that's really the question is, do you like generally what's proposed here, and do you want us to kind of go back to the drawing board and get more detail, I guess, if you will, and then be able to start bringing things forward to you to consider?
Yes.
I think it's great.
Design, anybody got any?
No, it's cool. It's great.
Looks
No, I
great.
like the
Now,
display sign that you did.
One clarification, we are not proposing to change our city logo. I think Mr. Spiniford's shirt's about as close as we can talk about there. That is the official city logo, I think.
Nice being a male model.
And that's on our letterhead and our official document, things like that. We're not proposing to change that. I would term this as branding elements. So even though you have the official logo, we're just simply talking about if we consistently adopt the swoosh star. And it's not to say that the Parks Department couldn't still use their Simply Fabulous and put their swoosh star in it, but from a standpoint of branding, that we would try to be more consistent with the use of our star, swoosh star. And certainly we're not gonna run out and, as he said, take off old logos and put on new logos. It would be a phasing deal as vehicles are replaced or things like that, that we would try to incorporate a more consistent logo.
So,
Is there an idea of what one of these costs is per sign like that?
We've got, do what?
I don't know if we know that detail yet.
Yeah.
And it's gonna get into a little bit of, I mean,
Is
we
it
may just
custom
decide
made
to-
as opposed to just
Yeah.
buying an off-the-shelf product?
what kind of architectural pole do you want, you know, there's a lot of detail there, but I think if we get enough of a nod that y'all say, so far we like what we see, then we can come back to you with some detail like that and
But
provide.
the thing is, even though technically it's a custom-built sign, once you make the mold once, it's now a standard sign. You pay for that custom of one, but then you're gonna end up with, 50 of them or whatever it is.
And we've got the names of the contractors and even the design company. Really, we didn't really think that that was necessary, of who did all of the examples that you've seen.
so I had a question. Is this a line item for art project or is this an EDC item? Where could we?
Well, in the
Capture
past,
some of
the
this.
only project we've ever had has basically been for our monument signs. This would be something that we would have to obviously get cost estimates, bring, to you if you like the general concept. Today, we're talking more concept, get you some budgets. I absolutely think it's something we could phase in over a number of years and, but we would probably just expand that project to be more city signage rather than just monument signage and then start with our key points and then expand it out over the number of years, so. But we could expand that project we have and we'd have to add additional funding to that.
Mr. Tompkins, I think 2 last slides here. It's something you and I have talked about specifically. These are examples of that kind of sign topper is what people call them. And so there's kind of 2 ways you see people do that. You see in many communities, they have specific neighborhoods, whether they be historic neighborhoods or big HOAs or what have you. They come in and they say, we want to do this. And typically, in fact, Richardson has your existing sign poles. The expense to it is just that piece. There's not typically a new pole going in or anything. And you kind of go around and it bolts on to the top. So your expenses really are the sign and, you know, a little bit of labor for your street crew to put that up. This is really bad PowerPoint here. I'm trying, but we just threw something out for a discussion. You really go in, well, if we're going to do something like that, and we're going to look at more of a city, like you're in Euless as opposed to you're in Morrisdale maybe. Back to our discussion of the Swiss Star. Do you use the Swiss Star? Well, then you kind of get into, well, it is, but is it enough yet maybe even for people to really associate? So the idea might be, do you design something around this idea that we're using the word Euless with the Swiss Star in other instances, noticeably the Euless Today piece? Or would you want something completely different? And again, this is not a, here's what we're going to do. This is just a discussion point from a idea of how could you further brand that you're in our city. And then this is really bad PowerPoint. And that may be worse. I think Mike did those.
But the question there would be is, would you all like us to try to find some way to, we do our signs in-house. So the sign blank where you're seeing Midway Drive, you know, you see the state of Texas and the Euless in the corner there. We've got a lot of inconsistencies with either not being there at all or being the state. So would you want us to go in a direction of trying to develop a topper, or would you want us to try and incorporate something within the sign blank
I
that we
think
can
on
use
the,
consistently?
like we have it on the left, I think especially when you have an intersection like that with the two signs, any kind of a topper is gonna look ridiculous.
Yep, I
It's gonna
agree.
look like you stuck
Yeah, you
cherries on
get
top
one
of
of
a sundae or
these that was
something.
an actual, I can't wait, I didn't have it there. Yeah, sometimes they start to look like 3 or 4 different,
Yeah, I
Signs,
don't know, is College Park a street? I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
These
So-
are all way too busy for me,
Yeah.
my
So-
personal taste.
yeah.
Do you all have any, first of all, are you fine with it just having a street name? Do you feel like it needs a city identity on it?
I don't think we
It does.
really need the city identity.
I think something like this on a main intersection with the Swiss Star on the left, instead of where it could have a little Euless on, that would be fine.
Which goes back to the very beginning when that said Texas Star 1400 block.
That's the
Yeah,
one that you have
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
right
So
there.
you
Exactly.
could incorporate that on some of those, or just have a simple street sign with no, but we don't have much consistency in that at all, so.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna really brand, let's brand with the star.
Mhm.
And if we're gonna put anything there, put the star to the left of it and.
Yeah.
Which does not overly clutter it.
And,
Yeah.
and I look at those, you know, you look at Bays or some of those main intersections coming off of our main streets, not necessarily deep into Lakewood or whatever, but at Ash and Main, it might have the Swiss Star on the left, that kind of
You're,
stuff.
you're thinking more of a distinction, that it is very, very hard for people to know, are you in Grapevine, are you in Euless, are you in Bedford, are you in Colleyville, in that
Yeah.
area?
So it's mainly on the,
Starting on the perimeter is what you're saying.
external
Uh-huh.
perimeter,
Yeah,
it's not
exactly, yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
deep into the neighborhood, do I
Yeah.
need to know that this is.
But yeah, the perimeters and then the main thoroughfares
Arteries.
that go through, yeah.
The star to me really lends itself to that, because the reason on the red Texas and Euless that it's done that way instead of like y'all's shirts is at that size, you can't read it. They had to separate it for you could even your eye would even pick up, so.
And Bedford has that Gothic
Big-
B or whatever font that is, but they brand with that big B. You can do the
No, I
same
thought that
thing.
was just a grade.
Well, that brings up a good point. And Linda brings up good, I was driving down and my wife brought to my attention, at Rio Grande, there's a sign on Rio Grande that says Bedford.
Okay, you gotta be talking about the intersection,
It's by Walmart.
Sig-
Right on
Signage
top-
intersection.
Right up on top of the lights
because
that
that
we paid to put
is
in.
in Bedford. That is their,
That light isn't.
that's their light.
They
That's
paid
their
for the
street
light?
sign.
Yeah, but Rio Grande
Is our street.
is our street.
But it is, if you look on Rio Grande, once you turn onto Rio Grande, they'll all be those signs like that say Rio Grande. But Cheeks Barger is Bedford's, so that blade was supplied by Bedford because that's their road.
Somebody said, I got you on this one. I got
Yeah,
it.
well, no, and-
Maybe we can negotiate that with the Glade
Well-
Park South development, that we want to change out of the plate sign.
Or the signs on 157.
because it's there, they're right there on the right there on the intersection, we have our EULA sign. I mean, talking about confusing,
Well, a lot of our boundaries in this area are very
I
confusing.
know, and I know that went back to, 25 or 30 years ago, we negotiated to even get that corner, because that used to be that on the very corner,
Right.
you
We
know,
did this swap there.
we did that little swap 30, 35 years ago.
I think, Bob, help me remember, is South Pipeline and is that you know what I'm talking about there?
Pipeline at Forest Ridge.
Yeah, is that a Bedford sign?
It's a Bedford sign, and it shows Pipeline as a Bedford
Road,
street
yeah.
with the,
So that's another one of those, it's not exactly
It's like
right.
Bay
the
Road,
pipeline
too.
itself is actually
Yep.
Ulyss.
Yeah, so we may need to
Forest
take a little
Ridge is
inventory and go
actually
talk to them.
Bedford.
So,
Yeah, Grapevine has their signs all down top of our,
But I think you use it to your advantage, because if we decide there's a red light needs to be at Wade and Pipeline, we just tell them we'll let them put up their sign like that if they'll pay for the red light.
I did engage the guy behind the counter at 7-Eleven at Glade in 121, so that's in Euless right there.
uh-huh.
I did engage them that they were in Euless. They got all this fundraising for the Grapevine Fire Department. I said, you're in Euless, and he looked at me like, who are you and why are you?
That big frog guy, that big frog.
Yeah, the
his
t-shirt
website
place,
is Holly
yeah.
Hill, he's an HEBIC sponsor.
Yeah.
And he gets
Well,
me
so
credit.
does Ross has
Yeah,
the sign
Ross says
inside,
it.
this is Colleyville.
I finally decided they were paying sales tax here, and I was okay.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
that's what we
Where's the-
decided years ago, as long
Yeah.
as we get the money, we're okay.
Yeah.
Well, we will, I'm sorry, Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you. We also discussed on 183 the possibility of having all of our exits have the same design and color scheme. Where did we come out on that? And is it involved in each one?
That was Southgate.
That's Southgate.
That, I would
No,
say,
we were, yeah,
yes,
exactly.
that discussion had to do with the aesthetics committee that's working with Midtown Express. And Mike, were you all able to get consistency on that? Or
Yes,
is
it
West
will
Park
be.
still going to be will there be a difference between?
We've not gotten an answer on West Park.
Okay, so the things going,
Well, if you think about it, 157, Hector Drive, Main Street, that
All that's
will all
gonna
be
be
the same.
consistent.
the question would be the West Park, because
Exactly.
West Park was
Well, if it
done
won't be
as
an
a part
extra drive.
of
Correct.
the original phase, and I think the question
There'll
was,
still
would
be a
they
bridge,
be
so
willing
they
to
can
change
get
that?
the bridge.
We
And
don't
they've just
know the
not
answer.
responded yet.
Okay.
Well, what they did on 114 is they put that big old S, if you're on 114 at Carroll, they put that giant S right in the cement as part of the barrier. So, I mean, there's some branding opportunity right there.
And I think where you're gonna get like on West Park, and Bob, who's gonna yell at me if I get this wrong, but West Park, the bridge at West Park Way is not in Euless. You don't get to Euless till you get to the other side.
Right.
So you really get down to, it's kinda like Mr. Bynum's deal, we start, okay, let's get out there and really identify where we're at. But I know those three bridges through Euless will be consistent, but there's absolutely gonna be somewhere in there, that's what we need to clarify. We talked about that paint scheme and all that. Really, that paint scheme is going to transition. There is a place where you get back to grade between 157 and West Parkway, and so the paint, if you will, goes away, and it's just grade and grass, and then it's going to pick back up with the current.
Where
current paint
where I'm
scheme.
going with this though, if we don't indicate that where you get off of 126 to get in Euless, where you get off 360 to get it, and where you get off 183 to get into Euless, then people miss Euless and all this signage.
Right.
I was just
It's
looking.
within
You're
our
saying we gotta
normal
make sure we get them at the
This is
freeway level.
Euless, then
I-
take
i-
off from there.
If we're gonna brand, is there a way before they do
Never
that to
did.
put our brand in as part of that design, is what I was hearing you say?
No, they won't, within the TxDOT right of way for
They will not.
consistency.
I will tell you, we have worked with TxDOT over the years, and the one I can think of is, it used to be 183 westbound, and it would say 360 Grapevine exit. And so we worked with TxDOT to say, wait a minute, that needs to say Euless Grapevine. And so,
Yeah.
it used to say Euless Main Street exit, it wasn't just Main Street.
Well, and the question was asked the other day about whether we could change the Mentor's Chapel
Yes, yeah, Al Aston was
sign
asking
and
that,
things of
sure.
that nature. So they have picked that planes, trains
Yep.
theme already, and I think we're the plane in that theme. So,
We get the good one.
We got the good one.
yeah, so I guess,
best
from
we're
the,
doing.
you know, from the standpoint of using our Swiss Star or something like that, I don't think that's on the table.
But
What,
this is
I think
yours.
where we'll have to be, trying to have as much influence as possible is on the exit signage itself, that we can get some identification, maybe on those overpasses to get some identification.
Good point.
But I don't believe they're gonna allow us to put our branding elements because they've already kind of chosen their theme.
And we've been working with Southgate and TxDOT on the new signage specific to the Southgate portion, not only during construction, but post-construction. Because what we heard from our business community was, okay, we understand some things may move, and the sign may actually move or what have you, but our folks are used to looking for verbiage. So we want the same, you know, make sure it still says Euless Main Street, Ector Drive, exit. Don't let them change the verbiage, because whether it be their folks are used to it or whether they've got printed material that says here's how you get here. So we're working with them to keep some consistency from what people are used to from that standpoint. Even if the sign moves back 100 yards, if it says the same thing, I think people will be used to that.
Do you all want to take a quick break, and then we will come back, and Mike's got just a quick development update that we weren't able to get to Tuesday night, so, and then there's snacks and fruit and drinks and so forth over here if y'all would like anything else to eat.